Welcome, and thank you for joining us for this episode of GodCast, recorded at Meadowbridge Seventh-day Adventist Church, 7400 Antique Lane, Mechanicsville, Virginia, 23116. Join us any Saturday for service. Our Sabbath school begins at 11 a.m. and our worship service begins at noon. We hope to see you there, but until then, please sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of GodCast.
Your host on behalf of the GodCast ministry team and the Meadowbridge Seventh-day Adventist Church. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on this episode of GodCast, How to Life with God. In our last two episodes, we discussed church hurt. We got a lot out of that conversation, and if you missed that episode, please go and check that out. But we came away realizing that forgiveness is necessary in order for us to move forward. So today, we will start a series on the topic of forgiveness. In this episode, we will look at focusing on forgiveness in general and as it relates to church hurt. Joining me today are my friends Jake, Aaron, Renee, Danny, and Alex. So let's go ahead and get into it. So thank you all for joining me today. I'm very excited to have you here. In our last episode, we talked about church hurt, and there was a lot of conversation around that, and just a lot of expression from our participants about things they've experienced in the church, as well as things that they have done to hurt other people in church. And we kind of came to one specific conclusion. There were a lot of things that came out of that conversation, but forgiveness and how do you get to that, and what is that, and how do you even do that? Especially some of those hurts were pretty significant. You know, we're not talking about little misunderstandings, but real scarring types of things. So we wanted to talk today about forgiveness. That seemed like the natural segue for that conversation, because we believe we need to get to that place. But for our audience, for our participants here, what is forgiveness?
To me, forgiveness means recognizing that I have been hurt in some way or shape or form. And I understand that because I had a hard time forgiving myself at some point in my life. And I had a hard time believing that God would forgive me. And so I finally got to that situation where I understood that God loves me and forgives me for anything that I've done, anything that I've said. And He works with me. And He helps me to understand other people and helps me to be able to forgive them.
Okay.
To me, forgiveness is a process. It's kind of like the end of a process where you get to a place where you have let go of some of the hurt that you mentioned and the pain that has been caused by whatever this thing is that you feel like you need to forgive, whether it be forgiving somebody else or forgiving yourself. But forgiveness kind of gets you to a place of peace, a place where you have kind of released some of the things that have, taken place in your life, again, that even get you in the place where you feel like you need to do that.
I think forgiveness is a gift that is both reciprocated on one end, primarily because it takes two to tango. it is always in the context of a relationship. It's in the context of two subjects, by which there might either be something there that's intruding into a relationship that either is for the relationship or is against it. Whatever that object is that's causing this interruption is that ability to see that it needs to come out. But forgiveness has to be either given or received, but it can only be done in the context of a relationship. So you need two people to make forgiveness happen. I think this is why forgiveness is always a huge topic in relationships, because it takes two, at least, I think, right? So, but it's another thing, as you were mentioning, Daniel, about actually forgiving yourself, because it is something you receive, but it's also something you give, which is something we should always have in mind when we talk about forgiveness, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And see, people in prison, they don't understand forgiveness. And because when I was there, I never understood how God could forgive me for all the bad things that I've done. And so therefore I wasn't ready to receive forgiveness from anybody.
Yeah.
And I wasn't willing to give forgiveness to anybody.
Yeah. Well, forgiveness also, if it's taken in that way, we're talking about degrees of judgment. But forgiveness has to also still be in a scope of, so for instance, if it's in a jail, prison case system, if you like, this is still a system, a court versus one person. And this is why forgiveness at its core can't be in a court system. It has to be a person to person or subject to subject, which would make forgiveness applicable, what we do. But good point.
Aaron, you kind of responded when Alex said forgiveness was about judgment, and it seemed like that kind of resonated with you. Talked about that for a little bit.
Because I think in somebody like who's in a prison system where they've done something to be put there, I think that's kind of what they're afraid of. They're afraid of that judgment, and so they're not being able to receive the forgiveness because they're still afraid of what that means to them, of what they've done.
Okay.
I think forgiveness means letting go, because when you have these records of wrong things you've done or ways people have mistreated you, all of these things, I can just imagine like keeping a book and writing down everything that anybody has ever done to me or that I've ever done to somebody else, and just like always holding that book with me. It would be such an emotional drain to always have that with you.
Wow.
So I think forgiveness is being able to throw that away, kind of throw it out the window, and really let go of those things. There's a Bible verse that says, love keeps no record of wrong.
Okay. Do you think true forgiveness, Jake, throws away the memory of the pain that causes that forgiveness to come about?
I think the memory will always be there, but the feeling behind it, that feeling of anger or of wrongdoing, that can go away. When you truly forgive someone and you allow yourself to be forgiven, those feelings that emotional baggage can go away.
So I guess forgiveness then includes healing in a sense.
Definitely.
So this goes back to what you were saying about journey and the process, I guess. That it's not this one event and saying forgiveness happens this way.
Yeah, it's not always instant. And I love that you just brought up the whole concept of letting it go. Because I remember I had a friend, or I've even had friends, period, who would say, if this happened in your life, you should let it go. And I would be so frustrated by those 3 words. Let it go. 3 words. Because I'm just like, what does that mean? Because you're saying let it go, but there's got to be an action to that. What is that action? And so over the course of my life, I have learned, I've learned what my idea of letting it go is, which is what I mentioned, is a process. And my process for me included a lot of prayer and a lot of time, and trying to not only raise my prayer, but to listen to the Lord and trust that, He's in the process, and that if in the process He tells me to do something, I have to do my part in that. So those 3 words, you know, just encapsulate so much, and it's different for every single person. So I can't say, well, you need to forgive them and you need to do whatever it was that I did. Like right now I just want to go through the process, but do whatever I did. But prayer, listening, you know, to God to see if He directs you, and then obeying, you know, whatever that is.
Was there any other part of that process that you can share? Because I think that I would agree with you, especially I think the deeper the hurt, the longer the process sometimes.
Yeah.
But prayer, and we know obviously that praying and asking God to help us, but what are the other actions maybe that someone makes, or that you might have taken to help with that process?
Okay. I will give a watered down version of the offense toward me. There was somebody who held a very important position in my life who I feel violated me. Did not touch me, but they violated me in a certain way that it made me feel very uncomfortable in their presence. And as life would have it, me and this person had to work together and be in the same space every day. And I hated every second of it. I did not want to look at the person. It made my skin crawl. There was just, it was just the worst feeling ever. And I said, God, I can't do this every day. I don't want to feel what I'm feeling. And I know that, you know, this person did what they did a long time ago. I don't want to keep putting it on them. Whatever it is I'm feeling, I don't want to keep doing that. And so I would pray, God, be with me today. And then I discovered this process, right? In the beginning of my process, I'm like, okay, Lord, I'm gonna try something different this month. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna be around this person. I'm just gonna suck it up and I'll be fine, right? And then I go to work and I'm not fine. I'm like, a whole month? No way, it's not gonna work. So then I'll break it down and I'll say, Lord, fine, I'm gonna do it this week. I'm just gonna suck it up and I'm gonna be around this person like it's no big deal. A week was way too long. And then I was like, what about today? Today was too long. And that's when I learned that this whole forgiveness process is a moment by moment. It's a one decision at a time process. Every time I had to get up to go and interact with this person, I'm like, Lord, I need you to be with me right now because I don't want to go in there because my disdain for this person, I felt like it showed on my face, it showed in my body language. And I'm like, Lord, take that from me just this one time, just so I can go and lay a piece of paper on this person's desk. Again, the process continued, and I struggled. But every day that I would pray, and I would just say, Lord, I can't do it by myself. I need you to be here with me. I need, when I go to place this piece of paper, I need you to help calm all of this stuff inside of me. And now, fast forwarding years, you would never know that I had this issue with this person. We can talk, we can laugh, I can be around them and I don't feel that disgusting feeling that I used to have. And I cannot, all I can say is that it's God and it's the process. Because day one, when I first realized I need to forgive this person, meaning I don't want to keep holding them hostage, whether he knows or not. I don't want to keep holding them hostage, and I don't want to keep holding myself hostage. Right? So I pray the process begins. You know, I didn't know that it would work, but you know, time, you know, goes by and I can stand where I am and say, it worked.
Wow.
Forgiveness
That's awesome.
for me was a process. And I do believe for some people it just may be, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. And some people can just let it go. But, you know, the deeper the pain, the deeper the hurt, the, you know, the more intense the scar, it may just be different for everybody. But that's my life experience that has gotten me to where I am.
I think also, thank you very much for sharing that. I think also not all of us have to be in constant interaction with the person who has scarred us in that way. You may see him even, you know, we're talking about church hurt in many respects. You may see him at church, you see him once a week, and that may be awkward and uncomfortable or what have you, but you don't have to be at home with them not saying that our family doesn't hurt, and stay tuned because we will be talking about forgiveness with families in the future, but you don't have to see them every day. You don't have to. So to me, that process of like every day having to make a decision was really significant. Anyone else?
Forgiveness is kind of a hard topic to talk about because there's so many factors that can kind of go into it. It depends on what the person did, how hard it hit you, how often they might have done it. But then it also depends on if they've apologized, if they're sincere about it, if you're able to be in a place to forgive that person. So I think it's hard. And then like time almost heals everything. So I think being able to give yourself that time, whether you see the person every day or not, that time is going to help you heal that wound.
But forgiveness can actually turn into bitterness. And I've gotten to that point before in the church.
Really?
That I thought that I will never forgive this person. And they're a Christian, so why would they treat me that way? Remembering my background, that I had a hard time understanding forgiveness to start with, but then to get hurt in the church, I thought this is wrong. This is bad. Because people in the church should love each other and should be willing to overlook some things, especially if they understand your background. And that just didn't happen. And for 2 years, I didn't speak to the person. I went the other way when the person came near me. And one day, and I was an elder. Not at this church, but I was an elder. And I asked God, I said, okay, Lord, you want me to preach this week? What do you want me to preach about? Bitterness. Bitterness. And so I began to study that whole bitterness and realized that it came from not forgiving this person. And so as I was studying, God was ministering to me.
Wow.
So the lack of forgiveness led to bitterness.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that's a short take all the time.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the things that you're mentioning, that just I think you were talking about spaces, and I guess for me it evokes whether forgiveness means abiding in the same presence. Does forgiveness require you to be in the same space in order for it to be forgiveness? And I'm not asking you like that, but I think it's a good one to discuss because I think forgiveness has to do with space, obviously. And I think it goes to the point where we've objectified people instead of treating them as subjects. They are human beings. We've made them into just things, right? And once we do that, we do whatever it is we do with things. That's why we hurt them, because we didn't, in a sense, accept them as subjects, as breathing, speaking people, you know. But at the end of the day, it's just, forgiveness is a divine thing, right? If we take scripture seriously. If Jesus, and I'm not here talking to you specifically, I think that's the biggest challenge, that Jesus isn't some crazy dude who loves people just for no reason, but that Jesus spends his life in the midst of his enemies. That is to say that he consumes the space of his enemies. For what purpose? I don't know. Obviously, what we do see is they eventually kill the guy. Is that forgiveness? Is that what our spaces should look like? And that's hard, especially when you're talking about in this case, you know, where that sort of experience. Are you meant to be there just for that sake? And so I'm not asking you as a answer me, but I think it provokes that for a lot, I think for us.
I think that's interesting. I think that's interesting because if someone were to offend you in any way, and you do feel like you have forgiven them, and you believe in your heart of hearts that you've forgiven them, but you have not been in their space, how do you know if you really have? You know what I mean? So if they do come into your space and all of that stuff doesn't rush
right
back
back.
with, if it doesn't come, then quite possibly, yes, I have forgiven. But then if it does, then what?
I've just
But-
separated myself from them, so I don't have to feel what I feel. But I think, for me, it's been that just thinking about the situation rises all the, I don't even need to be in their physical presence.
Sure.
For them taking up space in my brain, in my heart, it rises that all up. So then I know I haven't forgiven, you know? And so I think space is more than just physical, it's emotional, it's mental, and you rehearse that thing, you know? And it's like, and every time you think about it, it's like it just happened right then. And so I think that's an important indicator, of course, that, yeah, I have been able to, what you said, Jake, let go of the trigger that brings. Like, it still happened, you know? And I even think the memory will fade after a while, because I've had that happen where I don't even, like, I see I don't even think about that thing, time. But there's a point before that where the emotion that comes with that, seeing them or it is no longer there. And I think that's a beautiful point that you made.
I'm curious as to the letting go factor. Let's say the prison system.
Mm-hmm.
The prison system is meant for you to remember.
To be repentant.
Sure. And then, of course, in a sense, in the Bible you find passages where it says, no, don't forget. Remember. Remember what you were. And it's kind of like, is God training his people to be, torturers of themselves? I don't think that's the case, but I think that the fact that we're talking about how the body, the mind, the triggers, all these things encapsulate forgiveness, brings up your point that forgiveness has a complex form of features that, in order for forgiveness to take place, requires a particular space for your body, your mind, the triggers, all to be in a place where it could heal, And it's a big deal. It's not just a mental recitation, And that's how profound our bodies are in a sense.
So we're talking about this. So is forgiveness really necessary, required?
So I think it's like a soft requirement, not
Okay.
like a hard requirement. Like, it shouldn't be forced, but it should be something that you plan to do. It should be something that you already make initiative to do, because it's gonna bring closure to you. It's gonna bring you at peace. It's gonna make you feel better. And not only that, it'll be able to help repair your relationships with people. So I think that's important, to be able to do that, to be able to repair relationships, and it kind of makes you a better person overall, I think.
Aaron, I like what you said about it not being forced. You can't force forgiveness, and it's not going to happen at a certain time. I mean, sometimes forgiveness can take years to be able to get to that point, because it requires an understanding. I had a situation, a really good friend of mine, we had been friends for years and years. Suddenly, over something very arbitrary, he was just like, I don't want to ever speak to you again. I don't want you in my life at all. Just totally cut me off, blocked me on texting and social media and everything, and I was just like so shocked by it, and like, why? Like, I didn't understand, where did this come from? It seems so out of the blue. How do I go about forgiving or asking for forgiveness from him when I don't know what I've done and I don't know what has caused this event to happen? And that was the most difficult part, just going over and over, dwelling on it. What did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? And about a year passed, and we didn't speak. And then I wasn't sure what to say, but I just basically typed up something that asked for his forgiveness, and I said, I forgive you, for cutting me off like that, and I hope you'll forgive me for whatever it is that I did, and I hope that we can talk about it and I can understand it. And it took him a little while, but eventually he reached out, and we just went back to normal, like things had never changed, which was nice, but at the same time, it was like that issue was not resolved. It was like, where did that year go? I still didn't have the answers. And finally, eventually, when we had kind of built up our friendship again and we were really close again, he shared with me that he was just going through a really, really hard time in his life. And I was busy with my own life and I missed that. And he was like just desperately seeking out some guidance and some support, and I didn't have that for him. I didn't give him that because I was so caught up in what I was doing, I didn't realize that. So being able to just have those answers and understand, and for me to be able to forgive him for doing that to me, and for him to be able to forgive me for not being there for him, was just really relieving.
I think that forgiveness is required if you need forgiveness. Because if you don't need forgiveness, you don't see a need to forgive anybody else. But if you see a need to forgive somebody else, it's because you have been forgiven. I think the Lord said it best when he said, to whom much is forgiven, much is required.
I think to amplify a little bit on the route you're headed, Jesus did say, forgive, and your heavenly Father will forgive you. Right? But that is to suggest that in the world, we have both wicked and righteous people. Righteousness does not mean sinless people. It just means those who do right. They do justice. The wicked are the ones who do things, who provoke things, so that there are moments of interruption in relationships. They murder, they do things behind people's back, they chit-chat, they gossip, they have haughty eyes, they have fiery tongue, and so forth. This is obvious, but the wicked, in a sense, have knowledge of exactly what they've done. That distinguishes exactly what we're talking about. I think there are those who know when they've done wrong, and there are those who don't. And it's obvious that even in the Levitical system, there were those who knew that they had caused an error, and there's different forms of doing that. And there are those who unconsciously affected something, and there was a thing for that. So when we talk about forgiveness, I think it's more so a very direct, open assault, a form of interruption into something that makes someone offended. And it's required, I think, to forgive someone with that knowledge. I think this goes to what you're highlighting. I think if it mattered to Jesus for us to know that, I think so, because it emulates what God has asked of us, essentially, however difficult that is. And I think I've heard it most of the times when somebody says, I'm not God. Oh, I understand, but
I would
that's...
say that's precisely why you need forgiveness, because you're not God. So why you should therefore forgive.
Yeah, and you know what, and if I can get personal on this level, I'm always about space. I don't have the fondest relationship with my sister because I always feel offended by her. There's things that she does that it's because of the person I am, I forgive easily, but I think an easy forgiver is always taken advantage of in so many ways. You can always do the same thing without any consequence per se. But every hug requires that you let go. And I've approached forgiveness in this way, that a hug requires that you confront somebody, that you hug, but that you also release. And I'm okay doing that. We don't have to occupy the same space for me to forgive them. I don't have to cuddle up. I can let go. But also recognize them that they are human too, that there's a form of dignity there. And my sister remains my sister. That's who she is. And there are moments where I wish she wasn't, because it hurts. It deeply hurts. It almost changes the way I approach particular relationships because of that. However, she's my sister. She is the most deepest challenge of my life, and yet it's the one that has taught me how to confront, hug, embrace, but also to let go.
As we can see from the first part of the conversation, true forgiveness is really a very personal, intimate, and sometimes really painful topic to discuss, because it is usually when we're hurt really deep, when it's challenging to forgive. Our friends shared about what forgiveness means to them, what it has required of them, and what it has given them. In part 2, we will learn more about what it looks like when we have forgiven, how to get to the place where you can forgive when you've been hurt in a church or safe place, and how to have a mindset of grace and forgiveness for everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope that you were encouraged by the conversation to start moving toward the freedom that comes with forgiving those who have hurt you, and also allowing God to forgive you. If you want to talk to someone, please email us at mbsda.godcast@gmail.com, and someone from the ministry team will connect with you. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit the notification bell so you can receive an alert when a new episode comes out. Like, comment, and share this program with others who may have questions about doing life with God. And join us next time when we will ask more questions and seek more answers as we continue moving Godward.